Hey everyone, welcome back to Sophomore Citizens. I'm Gigi.
I'm Liesel.
And I'm Lilly. So today for our check-in, I'm so excited to announce to everyone that I am an auntie, and I am the auntie to Gigi and Liesel's wonderful new dog that I'm so excited to hear more about. So will one of you please take it away?
Yes. So sadly, last year, at the very last day of last year, our darling dog of 15 and a half years, Tallulah May, passed away. It was really hard, and I don't think we've mentioned it on the podcast. Tuli was a main member of our family, and we loved her so much. She was featured in our Ultimate Treat Day. So if you want to see our precious angel, you can head over there and check that out. We also talked, obviously, on the podcast about Tuli's magic carpet ride and the wonderful adventures that she would have on our mom's bed. So, as always, we will always carry Tuli in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls, in our spirits. And she will always be, I believe, the patron saint of sophomore citizens. But it has now been a couple of months, and we were really feeling the need of a new dog in our home. So we were able to rescue a beautiful new dog named Sir Duke Dumont Foster, and we adopted him uh, less than a week ago now. And unfortunately, he had a rough life before coming to us. He was abandoned at a dog park. And at some point, either before or after he was abandoned at the dog park, he was also hit by a car, which led to him actually tearing his ACL, we think, or his whatever the doggy equivalent to an ACL tear is. He did that. And so he had to have surgery. He has one leg that is shaven and that he is still learning how to walk on again. He has some teeth, his bottom row of teeth show on the bottom, and he has a very unique eye color, which is amber. I think that's what it's called, or something like that. Which is kind of, he basically has like every eye color. Like he has like green, blue, like he has like black little circles, and he has very unique eyes. So he's a very special specimen of a dog. Gigi, do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like adopting him?
Sure. It was really a whirlwind of a couple of days that we went from not even knowing that this dog was in existence to opening our arms and the door to our home to this young canine. We've had nothing but positive experiences with him, I would say. As far as like dogs go, I feel that he is a very chill and easy to get along with type of doggy. He's super weird, but like in the kind of adorable, endearing way that you just want to squeeze and hug and love. And he's really like fluffy and soft, which is most important. Like I think a dog, as long as a dog is fluffy and soft and it's nice, what is there not to love?
Yeah. And he's very nice, very sweet, generally very chill. He does have some bursts of crazy energy every once in a while, but for the most part, like he just wants to like hang out on his bed, like cuddle with us a little bit, get lots of pets and love and go on walks, and he's very good so far. So, we're hoping that we stick with this, and we're excited to potentially share more about little Duke in future episodes. He is going to be getting a doggy DNA test soon because we have no idea what kind of breed he is, especially with his unique look. We really have no idea. So we're very excited to find out his breed and find out more about him, discover, what really makes Duke Duke. Oh, and I think we should explain a little bit about his name. Gigi, do you want to explain?
Well, first, I think it's important to say that he was given this name. We
Yes.
did not choose this name for him, but we did intentionally leave this name for a special reason. So the family group chat at the moment is called Castle because kings and queens live in the castle. And so, in this process of trying to get a new dog, there was one little mischievous Marshall that had come into our lives. Not really, but we were thinking of maybe adopting this dog named Marshall. And when we look up the name Marshall, its origin is from the cavalry, leader of the cavalry of the castle, protector of the castle. So we thought this is perfect. Our new doggy will have this, little extended metaphor of the castle name. But unfortunately, someone else, adopted Marshall, and we had to bid him farewell in our hearts and our minds. But then Duke came along, and we said, how perfect that we're the kings and queens, and he is the Duke of the castle.
Right. And just to clarify, like we call the group castle because we have a tendency to call other people, especially our family members, king or queen, like, hey, queen, like, thanks for dinner, queen, good night, king, all of that kind of stuff. It's stuff that you hear regularly around our house. And as we've mentioned before on the podcast, we also have a gender neutral version of this, which is sovereign, sov, savi. So it's very inclusive. The castle, the kingdom, the monarchy, like, brings everyone together. And so that's why it's just Duke is just the icing on top of the cake of the sovereignty.
He really does feel like he was meant to be, and I am so excited for the day that I get to meet Duke in person and pet his soft fur. But I hope Duke knows that his auntie loves him already and is so excited to spoil him.
And if you would like to see photos of Duke, you can follow him at Duke's Plan on Instagram.
Yes. Well, with that, I think that we should jump right in to this week's episode, which is all about movies. So rather than doing our traditional one person per topic, we have a series of mini topics that we are going to more or less rapid fire our way through. So I'm going to introduce each one that is related to movies and talk about it. So the first movie related topic is rom-coms getting low ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. What do we think about this? Why does this happen?
Yes. So I would like to talk, honestly, just generally about Rotten Tomatoes first and foremost. Like, is that a platform that you girls go to, care about? What do you guys think about it?
I think of it as a pretty general and mostly objective metric for movies and TV shows. And obviously, I keep in mind that they have a tendency towards certain types of content versus other types of content, or that just because it gets a 20%, let's say, on Rotten Tomatoes, doesn't necessarily gauge my enjoyment of it, but I feel like I can get a sense of what breed of movie it is. Is it like a high quality, good writing, good everything type of movie? Or is it I don't know, bad teen movie that I'm just going to watch for entertainment value, but not for the actual, cinematic production?
I would say that Rotten Tomatoes doesn't play a very big role in my life because I objectively don't like good movies. So Rotten Tomatoes and I don't really get along because my taste is not on par with the Rotten Tomatoes objectively good standard.
Mm-hmm. And I really do enjoy checking on the Rotten Tomatoes. And I find it most useful when we're thinking about instances where the Rotten Tomatoes drastically differs from my other perception of the film, right? So if I have a film that I'm like, this seems like an Oscar, type, like really highbrow film, but then I go onto the Rotten Tomatoes and it's like a 20%. Like, I know that I'm not going to enjoy that movie because already an Oscar type, la-di-da-di drama, like, there's a good chance I probably won't like it already. But then if it has a low Rotten Tomatoes, like, I'm like, this is even worse. Like, mayday, mayday, we need to get out of here. And if there's a movie where I'm like, this seems like kind of a bad movie, but it has like a 90 on Rotten Tomatoes, like, that there's something going on there, But to get to the main idea here, which is that, rom-coms, like, I don't know, let's just say like Legally Blonde, Devil Wears Prada, all of those type of movies have really low Rotten Tomatoes, whereas some other movies that, in my opinion, are kind of equal in how good or bad they are, like the Avengers, like Spider-Man, superhero movies tend to get like perfect scores on Rotten Tomatoes. And personally, I just think this is such an injustice against the art and craft of the rom-com, because a good rom-com that can make you laugh, can make you feel something, has a lot of merit and value in society. You know what I mean?
Liesel, I am right there with you. And this, to me, brings up the age-old question, which is age-old in terms of I've heard this once in my life, like, maybe a few months ago. Would you rather only be able to watch the Rotten Tomatoes movies that have 100% or never be able to watch those, but be able to watch everything else? And for me, I mean, going back to the fact that, like, maybe I don't really have movie standards and I like objectively bad movies, it's not even a question. I don't really want to watch the 100% ones because the ones that I'm really loving are the rom-coms, and we need justice for those because they are not performing as well as they should be on Rotten Tomatoes. I agree completely with you, Liesel.
That's also just not even a question in my mind because, like, everything that isn't 100 still includes 99, 98, 97, 96, and so on. And so, like, just by the sheer number of movies that get 100, like, I'll watch all those movies in however amount of time, and then can only watch those over and over again when it probably doesn't even actually include my favorite movie. Like, it's not even a question.
Yeah, it's absolutely no question. And like with 100%, like if I see 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, my expectations are just so high. I don't think they're gonna get met. You know what I mean? Like 9 times out of 10, you're just gonna be disappointed because a movie can't be that incredible. Um, but yeah, I just feel like a lot of these superhero type movies, like when you really watch them and break them down, the types of jokes that they make and the dialogue, the character development, all of that kind of stuff that you would think that movie critics would be looking at is typically worse than like a well-made rom-com. You know what I mean? Like well-made rom-coms, which there are a good amount out there, are clever and funny and have character development and are interesting and engaging. And it's like just because it's for women or about women, I think that they get overlooked a lot of the times. And I think that that's something that movie reviewers need to be like consciously thinking about, especially because I'm pretty sure like movie reviewing in general is a very male dominated field. So it's like, of course, that's going to make, male people are going to probably be more interested in male dominated, types of movies. But it's like, it's just irresponsible to like rate something based on your own personal preference. You know what I mean?
Totally. And, this actually kind of connects to a real life experience that I had last night. Me and some friends went to go support another friend of ours at an open mic night for a comedy, like stand up thing. It was outside, masks on, so we were safe. Don't be worried. Um, and so just something that like sort of stood out to me and a couple of my friends who are also young women, um, we've just found ourselves not entirely, not like through and through, but generally speaking, we found ourselves enjoying the women comics as opposed to some of the guy comics. Whereas, like, some of our guy friends were really laughing at a bunch of these like guy jokes. And not that it needs to be reduced to guy jokes or girl jokes, but I think in general, like, women, like the women comics were speaking on, things that are funny to women because they were speaking either on like personal experience or making jokes about themselves. So it's then obviously going to be more funny to us women, whereas like the boy jokes or whatever that I don't really find that funny or relate to in any way, my guy friends were like, crying tears of laughter. So I think that this also kind of connects to what you're saying, Liesel, and just in terms of like, if the field of movie criticism is dominated by men, then it's inherently going to be, skewed that direction in terms of the percentage reviews.
Yeah. And I think that like reviewing anything is such a difficult task because it's hard to take your own biases and thoughts and opinions and out of it and try to be objective in any way. And I it must be really challenging to like try to do that and be objective with it. And I think that like movies in general are such a personal thing. Like when you watch a movie, I think that there's so many subconscious parts of your brain that are functioning and operating, of like memories that you might have, or like scenes that kind of trigger something in you that make you feel something in particular that other people wouldn't understand or wouldn't relate to. And even like with visuals and music and all of that different type of stuff, like it is going to hit all of our brains so differently. And I think that that's something that's really special and cool about movies. And especially when you see a movie and you're like, whoever made that movie, or all of the people who made that movie, like understand something about something that I feel like I also understand. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that having this discussion about male dominated movie criticism lends itself so well into our next topic, which is how much value we place in the Oscar. And I think that if you're going to talk about movies and male dominated, obviously the Academy, which is the parent organization that puts on the Oscars, has been critiqued year after year for not recognizing films that include people of color, that include women. And I think it comes down to exactly what you were saying, Liesel, like people's implicit bias surrounding this type of thing. And I think it really affects the way that I view the Oscars personally, of how much value I place in it. It's like, well, first of all, I am not a man. And so I don't know that my views on this movie align with yours, just because of the varied experiences that we've had and the way that you're looking at these movies. So I think that really depletes the respect and the value that I put in the Oscar. And I think that furthermore, all the criticism that has surrounded it leads me to be very skeptical with the Oscar winning films.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the most interesting things about like Oscar films and like Oscar bait specifically is how much the Oscars favors movies about movies, or movies about movie making. Like, or, you know, there's like a lot of movies that have won the Oscar. Like, I remember there was that one that was like a silent film, you know, and it's like, of course, people who are into movies are going to enjoy a movie about filmmaking way more than like anyone else in the population, you know, cares about that. So it's like, that's a perfect example of just like our own experiences and biases, like literally create why we like certain movies and why we don't like others. And that was one of the things that when I kind of like read about that pattern or whatever, found out about that, that was what made me really like put the nail in the coffin of trusting Oscar, like with anything, because it's like, of course, like these Hollywood elites are gonna enjoy films about Hollywood. You know what I mean?
And going off of that, it's just funny to me that there's such a type of movie that fits into the Oscar. And like, as I said earlier, like that's not really my type. And so it's interesting that there's this quote unquote objectively good movie, and like how we've developed that. Like, yes, I can understand that like cinematic performance and quality acting is good, but when those things are so subjective, it's interesting to think about, in my opinion, how we made it to this area of really objectively good films that year and year, like every time, become Oscar nominees and Oscar winners.
I just also don't care for the fact that, like, for the most part, it's the same like handful of films that's being nominated for every single category, whether it's best actress, best supporting actor, best film, like best whatever. Like the only ones that have much variation would be like best foreign film, where like most of the time there isn't going to be overlap. But even in the example of Parasite, like that, just swept up so many freaking Oscars, which like that's not to say it wasn't deserving, but it's just frustrating when it's like the same five movies get nominated for all, like basically every single category.
And like, listen, I've notoriously like hated award shows for a long time. Like, I just don't understand the point of them. And I just think that they're so like boring and overrated and weird. Honestly, and like culty, like they just always give me that good cult vibe. But at the end of the day, like I also want to go back to like, I get why the Oscars exist and I kind of do appreciate them on some extent. For example, Parasite is a movie that I honestly don't think I ever would have seen unless it won Best Picture. Like there was just so much buzz around it after it won the Oscar, in my opinion, that it was like, I just need to see this movie. So at the end of the day, like Oscar is an institution after all. And, we have to respect him.
Liesel, I agree with what you said, and I think they serve a purpose. But here's where I'm gonna disagree: is that I think award shows are wonderful. I absolutely love award shows, and I was gonna say my favorite part of the Oscars. Like, I take a lot of issue with the way that it is dominated by these white males, just like we talked about. I don't need to keep repeating that, but I think that like the fabulosity of the Oscars and like getting to talk to the actors and get presenters and all of that I love. So I live for that, but it's the other part of the Oscars and other award shows where I'm more skeptical.
We will agree to disagree on that one, Lily.
I will agree with you to disagree. Yes. And our next topic is Netflix originals.
Yes. I think that the advent of the Netflix original has been something that's really been interesting to watch. And like thinking back to when Netflix was sending DVDs, that's just it's such a moment in time to go back to. And now with Netflix just pumping out film after film after film of every single genre, I think it's impressive, but it's also scary sometimes for me. And as much as I enjoy a lot of Netflix movies, like sometimes I think that they could chill out on them, which I feel like we've already talked a little bit about in our holiday episode when we were talking about Christmas movies and holiday movies and how like Netflix just decided to like take over the, Hallmark movie, like lifetime movie category. And it's like, I don't know that that's necessarily needed.
I definitely feel like my relationship with Netflix original movies has been one that I have had to warm up to. I feel like when this started, I was like, what? And now I've come to love, with exceptions, like we talked about. But it definitely was a gradual warming up process. But I do think that the streaming abilities that Netflix has as a movie production company does lend themselves to like really have an idea. I guess everyone has this idea, but I feel like Netflix does kind of know what I want to see. And I can appreciate that because I do think a lot of Netflix original movies are very good and I respect them now as a movie production agency. But again, when this began, I felt very skeptical.
Funny enough, I feel like I had the opposite experience where when Netflix started putting out movies of their own, or like, to be honest, I don't know if I was catching them like right at the beginning, but like for example, I can remember Kissing Booth as one of the like earlier movies, and I remember I think I was a freshman in college and I was just like so excited that Netflix was putting out their own shit, and like I didn't even care that the movie was bad. I was like I'm just excited to get to watch whatever like Netflix original. And now I feel slightly less excited because I just feel like they are I feel like I can count less and less on the quality just because there is kind of a high quantity. And so I'm just like, not everyone's going to catch.
Okay, our next movie topic is DComs.
I don't really remember what we wanted to talk about DComs about. I feel like we probably, when we wrote this note down, had something in mind for the DComs. I definitely, with Disney Plus coming around these days, like it has, allowed us to look back on some of our favorite Disney Channel original movies. Um, and I still just have such a special place in my heart for like a lot of those movies. And I hope that kids now are finding them on Disney Plus and watching them. I don't know if you girls want to name a couple of your favorite Disney Channel original movies. But I really always loved Double Teamed, and Gigi and I watched it somewhat recently. And I think it held up. Like I think it was okay. It's funny how like as a kid you remember movies so differently than how they actually are. Like I feel like I remember so much more stuff happening, but like there was really only like one basketball game that the twins played. Like there was one big basketball game. That was pretty much it. And I remember it being such an action-packed movie. You know what I mean?
I totally agree, Liesel. Another one that I would like to give mention to is Model Behavior, also about twins. And they switch lives, and one's a model and one's not. And I'm pretty sure Justin Timberlake is in it. So,
Yeah.
pretty big deal if you ask me. One thing I will say about DComs is I honestly feel like we've just been blessed in terms of content like our entire lives. What, like, literally, what are the kids watching today? Like, are they getting movies like every few months the way that we were? I don't think so.
No, I don't
Like,
think so
we
either.
literally, we got Cheetah Girls, we got Camp Rock, we got Lizzie McGuire movie, we got you know
School
the classics,
Musical.
the favorites, High School Musical. Are you even kidding? Thank you, Lily. Like the 13th Year, Full Court Miracle, like all those OGs as well. So I just feel really bad for the kids of today. Like literally, what are they watching?
I know. And like, it was such a slow process, I feel like, of Disney Channel original movies, like becoming less and less and less, because I feel like there were so many of those movies that were like not high budget. Like they were just kind of like randoms, like even Cheetah Girls, like the original Cheetah Girls is not like some super high budget movie. But I feel like now Disney Channel original movies are like Descendants and that's it. Like it has to be this like huge production with like so many people and like songs and dancing and costumes and all this craziness. But it's like it doesn't have to be like that. Like it can just be about like a kid and like them having their birthday and then playing a basketball game and like drinking a soda and that's it. Like I feel like that's how our movies used to be.
I
Right,
would
Lisa,
be
you were just saying how you remember movies being so action packed,
No, but
and
that's what
then
I'm saying. We were satisfied with them just, playing basketball. That was like the
and
peak excitement.
drinking a soda.
Drinking a little sody pop. Like that's all the kids need. But now we're like training these kids who like need to be stimulated with this, high quality content and I don't think it's good for them.
I would be remiss if I did not mention one of my favorite movies of all time, which is the Halloween Town 1, 2, 3, and 4s. So that is the best decom of all time. Well, there's 4 of them. So we must talk about that. And Jump In is also another really good one. Yes, Gigi, Halloween Town 4. So those are my 2 favorites ever, but Halloween Town wins all the awards in my mind. And there was just something like I remember as a kid being so excited to watch them. And it was unlike watching in a movie theater, watching a show. Like there was something special about the decom magic. Like somehow they took Disneyland magic and like sprinkled just a tiny bit into decoms where you felt like I am having a novel viewing experience and it is so exciting.
Well, and I also remember the way that they would like hype it up on the commercials. So you'd like get excited. And specifically, I remember with Camp Rock being released probably like June later on in my elementary school years. Like, school got out and then it was time to watch Camp Rock. And I was like, Mom, like it's Friday, let me get some pizza and watch Camp Rock. Like, what is literally better than that? Like, still to this day, what is better than a new movie coming out to watching your home and getting some pizza and rallying the troops and enjoying that viewing experience?
Exactly. And like case in point, like Camp Rock is literally just about a camp where kids go to play music. That's all we need. It's just something simple, sweet, good and get those little teeny boppers what they need. So honestly, like this is my job application to work at Disney and bring back the simple days of DComs. And I honestly think I could do it in 2021.
I support that entirely. So next up is watching movies where you've read the book. I have a lot of mixed thoughts on this because when I read a book, my most favoriteest game to play is who would play this in a movie and who in my real life would play this. So getting to see that, I absolutely love. Getting to confirm or deny, so fun. I mean, not that I've ever confirmed because I've never accurately predicted it, but 9 times out of 10, I leave the movie feeling differently about the book than I did when I read it because of changes. And I also just think I'm way more sensitive to like anything that didn't happen exactly like that in the book that inevitably needs to be changed for movie production, I'm like, no, 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 no. So then I leave with like a tainted view on the movie and a tainted view on the book, which is why I have mixed thoughts.
I agree, Lil. I feel like it is exciting to see the movie or TV adaptation of, a book that you enjoyed. But I feel like it is oftentimes disappointing because they do need to make changes or whatever it might be. So, as much as like the visual aspect of it is fun, and I do appreciate getting that experience because I think it is cool to watch the creative interpretation of a book into, film or television. But I think it is almost always disappointing just because I feel like the expectations are almost always so high that the visual aspect will meet all of your hopes and dreams of how you envisioned things while you were reading. And that rarely ever happens.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that like that definitely comes down to the fact that when you're reading a book, you are so with the characters and like with their every thought and feeling and emotion, and like you just can't convey that in a movie in a way that isn't like cheesy. A voiceover is never going to completely, like feel right or like have the same effect as like being in a character's point of view and in their head is going to be. But I don't know why, for some reason, like I love reading books and watching movies and comparing and contrasting them. Like it just does something to my brain. Like I just really get excited when I get to do that. So I love like reading a book and then watching the movie, or vice versa, and just going back and like comparing and like seeing what, the actual like thoughts and feelings were and all that kind of stuff. And even like if I don't go back and read the book, if something is based on a book, I always like to go and like check on the Wikipedia page and like see what was different, see what was happening in the book, and kind of like compare and contrast. Like there's just something about that I think is really interesting.
But wouldn't you say, Liesel, that you've had the experience of like I remember when we watched Perseus Jackson after I had just read Perseus Jackson, like I just felt that the beauty and the splendor had been so like distorted and warped through the film's lens that I was upset.
Yeah, for whatever reason, like, yeah, sometimes I will get upset or like annoyed at how they've interpreted it, but I still enjoy the process of like doing the comparison and like investigating the whole situation, and even like coming up with ideas of why they had to make certain changes or like why they made those choices. Like I just think that's really interesting. And on the flip side, to give a shout out to something that I thought did a really good job of being a book to movie or show adaptation, was Normal People, which I said was one of my top shows of 2020. Like that was just such a great example, tonally, visually, text, everything, the characters. I thought that was like a really great representation. And I hope that there's more and more stuff out there that is like that. But for example, a show that I literally couldn't get through, Little Fires Everywhere, because it was just way too different and I did not enjoy the changes that they made. So Gigi, you're right. Sometimes it is like very upsetting to me and I can't even move on with it. But I would like to take this opportunity, as we are talking about something literary, to shout out our next episode, or one of our next episodes, which will be our book club episode about the book Luster by Raven Leilani. If you have not picked it up, maybe give it a read. And then next week you can tune in and hear all of our thoughts and hear our Hollywood treatment casting for the characters as well.
And with that, the next movie topic is rewatching movies, which I am incredibly anti. I will leave it at that.
Lily, this is literally coming from the person who has a designated sick movie. You probably get sick at least once a year and put on this said movie.
Okay. I have select films. I would almost go so far as to say select film that I will rewatch. In general, I do not enjoy doing it. If I've already seen it and everyone's like, we want to watch this movie, I'd be like, no, I don't want to rewatch. I don't like rewatching TV shows either. Like, yes, I have a designated sick movie, but That is because I love the movie so much, and that's why it speaks to how incredible it is, because it can overcome my anti thoughts on rewatching movies.
Yeah, no, I get it, Lil. I also think that I'm someone who it's either like this is a movie that I love to pieces and could watch infinite number of times, or it's a movie that, like, I'll see 2 to 3 times max, and I don't really need to experience it ever again. But I do almost always feel that a second viewing gives you a renewed perspective on the film when you know exactly what the outcome is, and you don't necessarily have to be so focused on the plot. You can really focus on other details or other creative choices. So I do think that most films warrant at least a two-time watch if you enjoy it. But if you don't enjoy it, like, absolutely not rewatch, obviously.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, I definitely enjoy rewatching, and there's a vast collection of movies that I've seen a lot of times that I will rewatch as many times as possible until I die. But I definitely can understand that, like, there are certain movies that it's kind of like, like, I didn't like love it, I didn't hate it, but I just like don't need to like watch that play out again. But the thing is with a rewatch, typically you're watching it with other people, and maybe like a different group of people than when you first watched it. And even that creates such a different experience. Like, even if it wasn't a movie that I like loved, if it was a movie that I found interesting in any way, and like think that the people that I'm with might find interesting, and there could be new discussion and like new things to kind of like unpack with the movie, then I think it's always worth a rewatch. It's not like you're going to rewatch something you didn't like by yourself. You know what I mean? But sometimes a rewatch can really help. And I'm pretty sure I did see a study. Don't quote me on this because I'm not sure. But I saw a study that people do typically enjoy a movie more the second time that they see it, or if the plot has been spoiled. So people actually like enjoy watching, the movie like get like arrive to the end point. And that it's not actually as enjoyable to like not know what's gonna happen. But don't quote me, like I'm pretty sure that was just like one random study that happened somewhere. But I think that's kind of an interesting idea because I personally like when I know what the end point is, it's more fun to like see how they're gonna get there versus being like just like totally like lost in the sauce, like you have no idea what's gonna happen, you know?
For me, it's definitely a case by case basis because I do think that there are some situations where it is valuable to know the ending and it's a matter of just sort of like, you know, finding your way through to the end. But sometimes I feel like if I'm too focused on the outcome, whether that's knowing it or not knowing it, I'm not just enjoying the journey that the film is taking me on. So ultimately, it's about the journey, it's not about the destination. And so sometimes that means knowing the end, and sometimes that means not knowing the end.
That was very insightful, Jay. Okay, so moving swiftly along, our next topic is subtitles in movies, which also can lend itself to foreign language films. Which my initial thoughts on subtitles in movies are that I don't prefer them. I do prefer them in TV shows, but I feel like when I'm watching a movie, it's more of a cinematic experience that I want to really indulge myself in. And I feel like sometimes the subtitles can take me out of that. And on that same note, that is why I kind of have a predisposition to not be that interested in foreign language films, because I feel like I cannot encapsulate myself in the film like I want to. But that is what makes a select few number of foreign language films, such as Parasite, which we have already mentioned on this podcast, so incredible that like it was able to overcome a language barrier. The barrier of having a subtitle that I had to read, and yet I was still so into this movie. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
I personally do really enjoy watching things with subtitles. I think that this has to do maybe with my enjoyment of words in general. Like recently I've been thinking a lot about the fact that I really listen to lyrics in music, and like I really hear the lyrics when I'm hearing a song and like think about them. And so I think similarly, like when I'm watching a movie and I can see the words as they're being said, like I think more about like the text of the movie. And I personally really enjoy that. Obviously, in comedic settings and certain settings, like subtitles kind of ruin things or they can be really distracting. But in general, I do really like subtitles. I do really enjoy watching foreign language films. But I also always feel like there's just like a je ne sais quoi that you're like missing out on, you know? And like when you watch a movie in English, like someone could say the same sentence 100 different ways and it have 100 different meanings. You know what I mean? And that kind of gets lost when you watch something in another language. Or like I've watched, you know, movies with friends who speak another language and they'll be like, that translation was so wrong. Like that was not what they just said. They didn't like capture the right intent, or it just doesn't even translate to English properly. And so like on that level, sometimes I find like watching things in a foreign language a little bit annoying, or it's just frustrating that you can't like fully understand the intonation and like everything that they're meaning to say.
Especially because I feel like there are even instances where you'll read translation, and even without someone who speaks that language there to verify whether or not it was a good translation, like you can sense something was off about what happened or the translation there, and that's obviously going to sort of chip away at the enjoyment experience. I do think just in general with subtitles, I do prefer them because I feel like my brain processes them better when I get to read and listen at the same time. But I can agree, Lily, that sometimes when it comes to TV shows, I feel like I need that extra processing power, and sometimes with movies, I'm like, I don't need that extra processing power because it's a 2-hour experience. And like, I want to be looking out for all the different other things, not just the words. But you know, that varies case by case for me for sure.
And going right off of that, I think this lends itself to our next topic very nicely, which is how TV shows have kind of become like 10-hour or 20-hour movies. And for me, they are such different viewing experiences. As I said, when I'm watching a movie, it is a more like it's more of an experience that I am putting myself into. When I'm watching a TV show, it feels more passive and like something that I am watching, whereas a movie is something that I am experiencing. What do you guys think about that?
Well, one thing that I find really frustrating as of late is that with seasons being so short and it being this kind of like extended movie, I also, well, okay, I'd like to rewind a little bit and say with a movie, you get an entire story start to finish in 2 hours. It is a self contained story with a most of the time like clear ending. And I feel like more and more with TV, we're seeing these weird open ended seasons. And I find that frustrating that not only do we get such short seasons, but that also like we don't even get the answers that we want at the end of seasons a lot of the time. And so this has just been something that I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah. And I think like just by nature of a TV show versus a movie, it's like a movie is probably only going to be produced, you know, written, directed by a small group of people over a contained period of time. You know what I mean? Whereas a TV show, like just by virtue of time passing and seasons happening and stuff, like it's going to have to pass hands. Like there's going to be different writers, there's going to be actors who are aging, there's going to be like so many things that are changing over time, and so it's much harder to like tell a cohesive story and like make sure that everything thematically like wraps up, and like that even things that you mentioned in season 1 could be completely changed by season 9, you know what I mean? Which I think it's really nice that movies are so self-contained and that you just like get this story, and I think that sometimes movies can be more thematically impactful because they are just like contained in one general story. You know what I mean? Um, I think it's interesting too. Like, I think that one of the best things for TV has been the disillusion of the commercial break. And even like thinking back to like DComs, it's like when a DCom had to have like commercial breaks throughout it, like as it does taint the experience. And I think that like now having shows that don't have commercials pretty much ever, like you're really never watching commercials, it can just elevate the experience of a TV show so much. And I think that that's like really contributed to this like renaissance of TV and TV being so good. And it's funny, actually, I'm watching WandaVision right now, which, if you haven't heard of it, it's like a Marvel TV show, but it's not really like about Marvel that much. But the interesting thing about it is each episode is like a different decade of TV. So, like, the first episode is like a 50s style sitcom, and then the second episode is 60s, and then the third episode is 70s. So, it is a really interesting thing to watch from the perspective of like seeing how TV has changed over time, and has really made me come to realize like how much I hate sitcoms, which like might be getting really off topic, but they stress me out so much when these people get put in these ridiculous scenarios, and it's supposed to be funny, but it's just stressful.
Liesel, it's actually really funny that you bring this up because I had that thought to myself, like pretty randomly last night. I was like thinking about what I wanted to watch, and I was like, I just don't want to put on like a sitcom of any type. Like, I just don't find myself like engaged with that content very well. And I like sometimes you want stuff that you can just put on that you're not engaged with, and like I totally see the value in that. But like when I want something that I want to pay attention to, I don't want a sitcom. Don't give me New Girl, don't give me The Office, don't give me any of that because I'm not going to actually pay attention.
Right.
I think everyone knows how I feel about sitcoms. If I haven't said it on this podcast before, I don't like sitcoms. We've discussed this quite a bit. It is not my style. So, Liesel, I totally wholeheartedly agree with you on that. And I do definitely just see, when I think of the major TV shows that I've watched recently or that have been really impactful on me, like one of the best examples I can think of is Big Little Lies. That feels like a movie. That, I mean, like the cinematic work that went into it, the storyline, like to me, that is a 10-hour movie. And when I think about the evolution of TV, it feels like it is turning into movie stuff. And Liesel, I love that you brought up the getting rid of commercials because I think that is such a big player in why we're seeing this change.
Yeah. And I think Big Little Lies is also a great example of, a show where season 2 rolled around and they, struggled to try to come up with more story because season 1 was such a great contained story.
Liesel, you said in your own words what I was just about to get at, which is it's difficult with TV shows sometimes because, for example, Big Little Lies does do such a great job of unraveling this story in season 1 in such a like unique, complicated way. And so we wanted more, but like it was done, like it was finished. And I almost just wish that the people who made that show would just like, how American Horror Story does like same actors, same creators, but takes on a whole different story each season. Like, I think that that is a really cool way of going about it. Or even like the way that The Crown does different actors every 2 seasons. I think that more TV shows should adopt those kinds of creative choices so that like the audience still has some attachment. Like you don't have to start from square one again, but there's still something fresh and interesting.
I think another TV show, I know we're getting a little off topic on this movie themed episode into TV shows, but another TV show that does a great job of that is The Sinner, which also has a new season out right now that people should watch. Because they change the storyline each episode, but it's always going to be crime related with the same detective, but we have new actors and a new crime to solve, self-contained story within the season.
And this whole discussion about TV shows that try to extend or whatever, or that kind of fail, I feel like it really goes back to what I was trying to get at with like the politics of TV shows getting in the way. And like Game of Thrones is another example where it should have had a little bit more time to wrap up. And yet the politics and the behind the scenes and the fact that it had been going on so long, the actors, the producers, everyone's kind of over it at a certain point. Like that gets in the way. And I think that that's something that people are not like talking about with movies and appreciating in movies so much, how they get to just like be completed and be their own beautiful, wonderful little entities.
I also I understand that within the span of this topic, I've said things like, it's frustrating to me when within a season we don't get sort of a wrapped up story, but then also I say things like I don't like when you finish your story and then try and keep going. So I understand that I've said some sort of contradictory things, but I do think an example of a show that did a good job of having a complete story but still having more to be said was the show Imposters. Now, I'm not going to try and say that this is a great television show, like in the conventional sense, but very entertaining, a fun show. And it had this like sort of mystery and, like detective, whatever, like fun vibe. That definitely like had suspenseful and interesting ending to the first season, but then still had plenty of stuff to do in season 2. Unfortunately, it got canceled and the story never got finished.
Once again, the politics are getting in the way.
The politics are getting in the way, but the Imposters, great show. Shout it out.
All right, so bringing it back to movies, our next movie topic is, quote, based on a true story that we see all the time in movies.
Yes, I think that this is a very interesting element to throw into a movie, like when at the beginning or the end it says based on a true story. Because first of all, what percent, how much, where do you draw the line? And I think that when people see based on a true story, they think that the whole thing is real. And I know that I'm like guilty of that as well. Like when I watch a TV show or a movie and I know that it's based on a true story, like I just want it to be the truth.
To your point, like you could basically say based on a true story about anything.
Yeah.
Like if it's a story about a girl falling in love, then that could be based on a true story.
Right.
Or that's just the first thing that comes to mind for me. The only thing that you can't really make the argument for is like really out there like sci-fi or whatever. But what, I bet you still could if it's like a story of two enemies battling. Like I don't freaking know, but anything could be based on a true story. And I do agree it's a misleading tagline
Mhm.
because it's like, to what extent is it based on a true story? Where is the truth and where is the fiction?
Mhm.
Well, going off of that, and furthermore to your point, Liesel, I remember when I was younger, and I think that the reason I said this all the time was motivated by seeing based on a true story in the movie sequence. I would say to my mom all the time, "Mom, was this real? Did this actually happen? Is this based on true?" Like I remember asking that question about lots of the media I consumed, and her being like, "Well, this didn't happen, but just like you were saying, Gigi, maybe these two men battle." Like it is just leaves this, and even my little kid brain was able to pick up on like, what part of this am I supposed to believe, and is this always true in movies, and what do I do with it?
Well, and also like to your point, Lily, about like kid brain being like, is this true? It's also like, what does that mean to us? Like, why are we bothered or why do we care whether or not it's true? And obviously, I think it makes sense that as a kid, you're just trying to piece together what's true and what's false. But I think that that also like at the end of the day, we're all just big kids. So it's like we still as adults have to try and make sense of, oh, this really happened. Oh, what's going on?
Yeah, and like I'm the first to pull up the Wikipedia page and find out what the true story was. Like you just it's just so enticing to try to figure out what was real and what was fake. But I think like it is important to point out the fact that like even if you watch a movie about like that's based on a true story and there's some, huge exaggerations, and even if you go and check on the Wikipedia and stuff, what sticks in the mind in my opinion is the movie. Like I feel like I've even like gone and researched and found out like, oh, that was an exaggeration, that wasn't real. But when I think back on an event, like let's just say it's like a true crime thing, that's like a fictional, depiction, what I'm going to remember is like the visuals and the vibe that I saw in the movie, not like the truth and the facts. You know what I mean? And I feel like filmmakers need to be a little bit more cautious about that.
Absolutely. So the next topic is music in movies, which my initial thoughts on may seem very evident, but I just need to express it, even though it's probably quite obvious, is just the incredible role they play. By they, I mean music in general. The incredible role that it plays in eliciting emotions and just having such incredible impact on the viewing experience, which again, I think everyone knows that. But when I think about how I feel in a movie, I feel like I don't give enough respect to the way that I felt because of the music. Whereas if I watch that same movie without the music, I maybe wouldn't think about it before, but I would feel differently walking out of it.
I also feel like what often happens to me is when I find myself noticing the music, that's a problem for me. When it's taking me out, that's a problem for me. When it is so seamlessly adding to the story, that's when the music is doing its job. Now, I'm talking more score there, but when it comes to like the music that they choose to put over like legitimate songs, not that score isn't legitimate songs, but you get what I'm saying. Um, I feel like those have more of a power to add in a more conscious part of the brain, that it's like creating a vibe and it's something that you're more like tuned into because there most of the time isn't dialogue over those kinds of songs, whereas score you could very likely have dialogue over the score. And so I feel like my biggest thoughts on music in movies is that score adds to the movie in a way that is should fly under the radar, and if you're noticing it, it's a bad thing. Whereas music, like sing songs kind of songs, then those should either kind of just coexist with the film, or it's adding to the viewer experience.
Totally. And I feel like, I completely agree with everything you said, Gigi. Um, I feel like a great movie can also change my mind on a song or like create a new memory with a song. Like there are certain songs that you listen to and you think about that scene in the movie and it just really sticks with you. And I think that that's also like a powerful marker of good music selection in movies.
All right, our next topic is documentaries, which is quite a broad movie related topic. But what do people have to say?
I love learning. That's how I feel. I love learning, and so most of the time I love documentaries. I definitely like have documentaries that I prefer over other ones. But a documentary has to be like really bad, or I one thing that I will say, and this relates mostly to like true crime type of stuff, and this could be docu-series or documentaries. I personally feel that journalism has to be at the forefront of the motivation. It's about the exposing of something or raising awareness about something. For me, it would ideally have some element of justice, social or otherwise, as opposed to like entertainment value, because I personally feel a little bit disturbed by those motivations for true crime. Um, but when we're just talking documentaries in general, I think it's lovely to learn. And I usually feel like documentaries don't get made, or at least good ones, they have something to say. And when people have something to say, I'm ready to listen.
Totally. I feel like I used to think the documentaries were so boring and kind of just like all the same. But I've really come to love documentaries, especially documentaries that break the formula or the format a little bit and kind of try to do something a little bit more creative and different in their method of storytelling. Like my favorite documentary is called The Imposter, and it includes a lot of reenactments which I would typically think like reenactments in a documentary might be kind of like cheesy and weird, and it kind of is. But in that case, like it really helps to tell the story well. And I think that like, you know, when documentarians take like a creative stance as opposed to just doing like interviews with people, like confessionals, and like that's the whole documentary, like I think that can just get a little monotonous. But in general, I really like documentaries.
I also really like documentaries. I think that documentaries get a really bad rep though. Like I think that for a lot of my life, and I think a lot of people think of, or at least what I associated for a while was like in high school when we had to watch like a boring documentary on something in class. And it's taken me quite some time, and becoming a junior journalist myself now, to be able to respect, G, like you were saying, good journalism has so much value. And we see that in documentaries so often. And in general, learning is fun. And like you said, you're making a documentary about something you have to say. And the thing you have to say most of the time is interesting and fascinating and new and cool in some way. So I also love learning. Next up is movie theaters versus watching movies at home. I'll begin just by saying that I am totally team watching movies at home.
That's very interesting. I enjoy both experiences, I would say equally, you know, for their different components. What I will say is, as a child, I had a deep and never ending fear of movie trailers, which sparked from, I believe, me being a young child going to see, you know, probably Shrek or something. I don't know. And the movie trailer that was put up on the screen was like a horror film, and like there was like guns and just, I don't know, scary bad stuff. And you know, it was just a mistake at the movie theater, like they, you know, played a bad scary movie trailer for these little children. And from that point on, the unpredictability of movie trailers really scared me, because it's like you see that like little like green, you know, part that says like this is approved for all audiences or whatever, and you have no idea what is going to come on the screen. Like they could put anything, and that unpredictability really scared me. So for the majority of my childhood, I would grab my popcorn, get in my seat, you know, if the screen was just showing those like commercials that they play before the trailers, I would, you know, settle in, watch those were okay. And then when the trailers were going to start, I would go outside and just wait and like listen up, or like my mom would like have to come with me and tell me like, okay, we're good, like we can go in, because you know Trolls is starting. Not that I watched Trolls ever, but you know, whatever.
Yeah, you
kiddie
weren't a
movie.
kid. You
I
were not
wasn't
a kid
when
in like
Trolls came out.
2015.
And I've never seen Trolls, like I don't really know what it's like, but yeah, so that's my main experience with movie theater going. Like sometimes even as an adult or a teenager, like that thought will spark in my mind, and I'll be like, they could put anything on the screen right now and they could really freak me out.
It is interesting how like it's one of those instances where you're really not like consenting to watching whatever they're gonna throw your way.
Exactly.
And Liesel, I actually do kind of remember like I feel like as a kid, you know, obviously I had my own things that I was like, that's scary and bad. Like, don't make me do that or view that. But like, I feel like I remember in my kid brain being like, why can't we just watch the trailers? Like, what the F? Like, what's wrong? Like, why can't I just go sit in my seat and like get ready for the film?
Right.
But yeah, no, I agree. I personally, on the topic of um the at-home experience as opposed to the movie theater experience, for me, there's a time and a place for both. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes I'm in the mood to be in my pajamas in my own home. Sometimes I'm in the mood to be in my pajamas out in the world. That's all it is. You know, I mean, I think like I'm not a huge movie theater snack person, so that doesn't necessarily apply to me. If anything, my at-home snack experience is going to be far superior to my movie theater snack experience. But I will say I love, like, definitely my brain and my eyes love how big the screen is.
Mm-hmm.
And my brain and my eyes and my ears love how loud it is.
For real.
Yes, and I am not denying all of that, but ultimately my team at home comes down to my dislike for trailers. So Liesel, I would just like to validate your fear as a child and continuing on to this day, because I still identify as a child. I am afraid of the unknown. I've seen the horror trailers too many times. I don't like them. Or just like weird things that like my kid brain interpreted as scary but wasn't scary, but because of the sound and like the size, it felt scary. Too often I was afraid of that. And so the home, also, Gigi, I agree. The snack game at home on point, the comfort at home. I'm not denying that there are certain movies where I'm like, I want the cinematic experience of seeing this in a theater. And I think that especially in COVID, having to watch new releases on streaming services, I have gained appreciation for the movie theater. But in general, I think that I can make better popcorn than the movie theater can. And that concludes our movie portion of this episode. I think that was a lovely discussion. And with that, we should move into recommendations, of which I have two. I will apologize because both of these are maybe the two most basic mainstream things ever, but they deserve to be recommended. The first is the Free Britney documentary on Hulu, which is like an hour and a half by the New York Times. And it is a wonderful piece of journalism, just like we were talking about, all about Britney Spears and the relationship that she has with her father. And it was so interesting. And I really loved watching it. And I think everyone should watch it. And then the other one is, this is really mainstream, I'm sorry, but my roommates and I had the pleasure of making the viral TikTok pasta, and it was literally so good. And in my opinion, not overrated at all. And we added spinach and mushrooms to it because it was just too plain if it was just pasta and sauce. And those were chef's kiss, fabulous additions. And so I just don't think it's overrated. It was so good and I want to eat it again. So I think everyone should make it if you haven't already.
I have thoughts on both of these things that I would like to just share quickly. Free Britney, of course, amazing docu. Like, once again, a slight situation, in my opinion, where I'm like, I wish that they would make this documentary when things are more solidified. But at the same time, it's great journalism because things are still going on. But it's like, it didn't really have that great of an ending because all of her conservatorship stuff is still going on. I also want to say, free Jamie Lynn. Like, she was literally given the name of her two parents. Her dad's name is Jamie and her mom's name is Lynn. Free that woman. She's been through a lot. On Zoe 101, she got pregnant as a teenager. She's a mom. She's living in Britney's shadow. So when I say free Britney, I also want to include a little shout out to dear Jamie Lynn. And the feta pasta sucks and I hate it and it is overrated.
Liesel.
It was not
Gigi,
good.
can you weigh in or you haven't had it?
I have not had the feta pasta, but I see how there could be a lot of variation in how it turns out for different parties. And so I don't doubt, Lily, that your experience was great and that it did taste good. But Liesel, I also don't doubt that yours didn't taste good.
It didn't taste terrible, but I just don't get it. Like, feta is good in like small doses, but I don't need her like covering my pasta. And I prefer to just have Rao enter the chat. Like, Rayo, sauce me up. I'm not ready to like blister my own tomatoes and like mash them up with some feta. Like, no.
All right. Well, does anyone have any other recommendations?
I do have one.
Yes.
Do you have the same recommendation, you think, or no?
Does it start with Lou and end with Pont?
Yep. Go for it.
So Liesel and I and our cousin watched the Netflix original Lupin. It is a French mystery vibe type show. It is sort of similar to Money Heist, if you've seen any Money Heist, but it follows our main character Hassan, and it has flashbacks to his childhood and uncovers his journey in trying to avenge his father. So it's a really interesting little mini series because there are only 5 episodes, but they've already confirmed that the second season will occur. But we're not even convinced it's like second season. We think it's like this was season 1 part A, and it'll be season 1 part B that's going to soon come out, because we figured they probably even filmed all together. So definitely check that one out on Netflix if you're looking for a new show. We certainly enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you both. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Sophomore Citizens, the podcast by young people for young people, with new episodes like every Monday ish. So we'll see you wise babies then. But until we see you next, you could definitely follow us on Instagram at Sophomore Citizens. If you aren't already, be subscribed to our YouTube channel. You could follow us on TikTok. You could send us an email, sophomorecitizens@gmail.com. It's Sophomore Citizens everywhere. So you should be doing all of that. And we'll see you wise babies soon. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. Don't forget about that.